There's three reasons why most people completely screw up outbound. One is they target poorly. Two is they have bad content. And three is their reps don't follow the process. I think we have 21 different signals now that we use. Some of them are signals that indicate we need to reach out. Some of them are just stacking signals that you then stack on top of the core signal that helps you personalize and be more relevant. That improved our reply rates from sub 2%, which is better than industry average on cold outbound. We had two specific sequences that we were feeding everything into, and one of them had 11% reply rates, and one of them had 16% reply rates. So we had a strong quarter of pipe gen on outbound because of that change. Listen, if you think AI is going to save you, you're wrong. It probably will mess you up before it saves you. And that's because if you don't have an established process a human can follow, you're sure as heck not going to create an agent that has a process that it can follow.
Welcome to Go-to-Market Science. In this podcast, we share tangible, actionable playbooks from the trenches, working as go-to-market strategy and RevOps consultants for our clients here at Union Square Consulting, and candid conversations with revenue leaders in the market that have been there. Now let's get into it.
Welcome back to CRO Stories. I'm your host, Rachel Buchert, and with me today is Mark Kosoglow, Chief Revenue Officer of Docebo. And Mark Kosoglow, he spent 8 years building Outreach's sales team from the ground up into one of the most formidable revenue machines in B2B SaaS. So since then, now he's, big words, right? Now he's So now CRO of Docebo, a publicly traded learning management system company doing 230 million ARR at the time of this recording. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us.
What up?
Yeah. So, Mark, I like to start things off with a big, interesting question, one that's very interesting to me and hopefully to listeners. So,
No, I'm interested.
Yeah, as I said, I'm going to pumping you up even more now. You built one of the most dominant sales teams in B2B SaaS at Outreach during those boom years. So now you're about 8 months into Docebo in a completely different market environment. What's been the biggest thing that you're doing differently as a CRO now versus what worked at Outreach? And kind of what surprised you about what still works exactly the same?
So I think I had a preconceived notion about learning management systems that they weren't extremely technical or complicated. And I would say within my first 3 days, that was completely blown out of the water. And I realized I did not do enough homework on my product. We are an extremely powerful product. With that power and flexibility comes some complexity. And we do a good job of helping customers through that. But that's probably one of the biggest changes is that Outreach wasn't a technical-ish product. Neither was Catalyst, really. And those products were more about, this is the outcome that you can create. And here is how we change the workflow to achieve those outcomes. It was more about human behavior change than it was about like technical change necessarily, versus an LMS is a little bit less about like the user experience and much more about how do we connect into the rich data system inside someone's tech stack with HR, with sales, with sales enablement, and all these different things that we need to connect into to make sure that learners are served up with the right content at the right time to achieve the skill up leveling that they need to get so that they can continue to do the jobs that they do. And so I'll say that's the biggest thing that's different is this is a much more technical heavy. Let's get into how, your HRIS system uses these APIs and webhooks to do this kind of stuff. Like, I don't even speak the language quite yet, but I think I'm getting it, right? And then what stays the same is, I think it's what's always been the same. A buyer will tell you how to sell them if you just shut your mouth and listen. And I think that never goes away. And like when a seller asks a great question, and then they keep going, and then they keep going, and then they end up never letting the person answer the question, or they cut the person off as they're asking, or they don't like really seek to understand. They just ask questions because that's what they've been trained to do. They're not actually involved in a real human conversation to seek common ground and understanding so that you can actually communicate correctly. I think then you're never going to win. And I don't think that that's ever going to change. I don't think that changes in sales. I don't think that changes in like our personal relationships either.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And you mentioned like the product itself is really complex. I'm curious, do you guys use your own product to train your own teams on the product?
Absolutely. Nice. We drink our own champagne.
Yes, I heard that recently. I like that. Drink your own champagne. Eddie, our boss, he always says, eat our own dog food. And I was
Yeah, that has some
recently,
negative connotations.
yeah,
And oddly enough, speaking of story time, is my dad ran all of manufacturing for M&M Mars for a few years. He ate a Snickers bar for about 7 years in the late 90s, early 2000s. My dad was responsible for making it and making it cheaper every single year. Well, before he got that job, he ran M&M Mars owns pet food plants. Pedigree dog food is owned by M&M Mars. Well, my dad ran one of the pet food plants, and literally every day they're so obsessive about the quality of their dog food that my dad and all of his leaders had to sample the dog food every morning and eat their own dog food every
literally
day to
eat
make
their
sure
own
it was
dog.
good.
Nice little
That
dog
phrase
food
has a
breakfast.
special meaning for me.
Yeah, yeah. That's hilarious. I've never heard of it as such a literal meaning for that.
Oh, it actually happens.
Yeah, that's so funny. Okay, Mark. So you mentioned Catalyst really quickly there. Tell us a little bit about your career journey story and, what led you to the role at Docebo today, where Catalyst came in with all that.
Yeah. Listen, I was an outside sales rep that was in the field that drove between 3 and 5 hours a day on 100% commission after my second year, selling fundraisers to schools. And I was not just a seller. I was the SDR. I was the marketer. I was the AE. I was the onboarder. I was the success person. I was the support person. I was the renewal person. I was the account manager. I basically ran an entire GTM cycle with every single one of my customers. And I built that sales territory from one that couldn't support a rep for longer than 6 months or hadn't supported a rep for longer than 6 months for over a decade to one that was one of the top 10% of territories in the entire country out of 250 different sellers. So I really learned my craft. And the way I learned it was I had a specific manager named Renee Ulloa, who was like a 6'5", 280-pound former offensive lineman, Hispanic spark plug. I mean, let's go. This guy was awesome. And one day I was in a meeting and he put his leg-sized finger into my chest.
Leg-sized.
Kosoglow, quit being so smart. Just do exactly what I tell you and you win. And I was like, all right, homie. And I was so intimidated I did it. Had my best year ever.
Nice.
Kept learning from him. Had my best year ever the year after that. Then I started to understand, like, what's going on here? How do I break this apart? Where is it not me? And where do I need to make it better? And then I use that to keep going. And I'll never be able to repay Renee for that awesomeness that he did for me. Then I went into sales leadership after that. I got headhunted and became the youngest regional sales director at a publicly traded company that also sold stuff to schools. And that's where I learned how to lead. And that after a year and a half of doing it horribly, I had a specific instance with a rep where they basically told me off and told me how horrible I was. And it was a wake up call to me. And I spent the next however long trying to get back and learn how to do it. And then I think by the time outreach came along, which was again another 1 in 10 billion chances that I would actually end up there. I mean, I was just in the middle of central Pennsylvania in a town of 5,000 people doing nothing. And somehow met Manny Medina, who was the CEO at Outreach. We hit it off, became friends. I asked him why I wasn't working here, and there we go. Off we are away with how it went. And so, but that's where I really learned how to be to take my sales skills and my leadership skills and create a predictable, revenue system that you could actually run and create and scale. But I didn't understand post-sales. So that's why I went to Catalyst, is to understand this customer success onboarding side of the revenue funnel versus just the acquisition side. And felt like I did a good job for them. And then tried the entrepreneur thing. That wasn't for me at the time. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm an operator. So I was looking or kind of thinking about what I want to do. And then Docebo actually approached me. And when I met them and saw the scope of the role, where the company was headed, met the executive team, met some reps and a few other people and did my homework, felt like it was a really good move for a SaaS-based product in an AI, world coming into AI really, really quickly. And that it made a lot of sense to me to go to learning, which is, everybody has AI. The best people use AI most creatively. the foundation of creativity is knowledge, and the only way to get knowledge is to learn. And to me, that creates an extremely compelling value case for the future of what we do.
Wow. So you've really run like the full gamut of every type of go-to-market operational position, each side of the bow tie.
I've been very, very lucky that for almost 8 years at Outreach, almost daily, I got to speak to some of the best GTM minds on the planet. And then that continued at Catalyst on the post-sale side. So listen, beg, borrow, steal your way to get your corpus of knowledge that you can use to develop the systems and stuff that you need to succeed. And I was very lucky at a lot of material to beg, borrow, and steal from.
Was that like your goal to like kind of like try different things and build up your base of knowledge, or were you just trying it to see where you fit?
For Outreach, it was literally, I have a chance to get into tech. I'd never would have had this chance. I saw the product and immediately was like, this is the future of sales. And I was just I wasn't drinking the Kool-Aid, I was swimming in the freaking Kool-Aid from day one. So, so that was just kind of serendipitous, but Catalyst was calculated. I had a good friend who was the co-founder there. He asked me to come on, and really, I was very, very excited to learn about and dig deeper into the post-sales motion, and so that was very intentional. And then Docebo is kind of my chance to take all my learnings pre and post-sales and what's going on with AI and how to like take my vision of what sales and where revenue is going and see if I can't create it here to great effect.
Nice. I just realized I've been pronouncing Docebo wrong. I was saying Docebo.
Don't worry. Common misconception. Docebo actually means I learn in Italian. And
really?
Our company was founded in Italy. So, yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, right? Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So walk us through your first 90 days at Docebo. What operational go-to-market challenges jumped out at you immediately when you first came in, and what did you do about it?
So I took the first quarter to basically observe. I tried to meet a lot of people, sat in on meetings. There were certain things that I did that were low-hanging fruit and obvious, but I didn't try to come in and change a lot or do things a lot that would disrupt all of the goodness that was already happening. I mean, we're a profitable, publicly traded company. We're growing at a decent rate. We want to really supercharge that. But I would say the first 90 days was more about learning and get my sea legs and getting the context and meeting people and starting to build those relationships that it takes to really do change at a company. And so that's pretty much what it was, just be sitting around. The first 90 days was, what do I want to, at the end of this first 90 days, start to communicate to my leadership team about the vision we have, the frameworks that we're going to use, and then how we're going to make decisions going forward in order to achieve these really awesome, aggressive goals that we have.
What were like the first challenges you encountered then? Maybe it wasn't in the first 90 days, but when you started, you got your bearings, you knew what was going on, and you started really looking into the metrics and the dashboards and seeing what you could improve on, what you can do to make a difference here. What was like the first thing that you rooted out?
Yeah, I think that we needed an evolved forecasting strategy. So we rolled out the way that I do forecasting, and it's actually an awesome story. In Q4, we were able to get within 3% accuracy of our day one forecast for Q4. And that's the most accurate that the company's ever been. Accurate forecasting is kind of like a CRO badge of honor, but actually it's an extremely important business process that allows us to plan correctly and make sure that we don't overspend or underinvest in areas of the business based on what we think is going to happen. And so it creates a lot of trust for when you say, hey, I need this, that you understand why you need it and can prove that you need it. But getting the forecasting to a high level of accuracy was important to me. And that's something that we were able to get in place pretty quickly, and it paid off right away.
So what kind of changes did you have to make to get it closer to that percentage mark that you're looking for?
Yeah. So when it comes to forecasting, there's a few things that I think are wrong. One is the haircut of the haircut. my rep says something, then my manager cuts off a little bit of that, then the director, then the VP, then the SVP, then the CRO, and then to the board, right? And like everybody's taking their little, I don't quite trust the person below me. I think that says to me that there's like some real foundational cracks that need to be filled in. The other thing that happens with forecasting is because of the haircutting, people start to understand that there's a lot of ambiguity about what you put in CRM, and therefore nobody really uses the forecast categories rigorously as instructed, and therefore you kind of lose all of the data integrity you need to actually do that. That's why you end up with some spreadsheet in the middle of nowhere in order to figure out what your forecast is. And so when you create that common language and then you create rigor, and then what ends up happening is people come in and they start to do the thing that you want. And so for us, we had to switch from kind of I'd say it was like a financially driven forecast methodology, or they wanted to really understand how the tops down and the bottoms up were the same. And if you wanted to forecast something, you had to commit the deal, which even if the deal you weren't sure you were going to win it. And so it was a little confusing to me as to how we were doing that versus what we put in place was I have 4 forecast categories. One of those categories has 3 kind of subcategories that are binary yes or no questions, and that have very clear criteria of when someone is in that and when they're out of it, which makes it very simple for everybody to understand, very simple to apply, and then creates those tough conversations that a rep and a manager need to have. It shouldn't be, hey, Rachel, this is in commit? Yeah, it's in commit. I don't believe it, but I'm not going to actually challenge Rachel on it right now because I don't know if it should be or not. So I'm going to just take that deal out of my forecast when I give it up to my VP. And now you just avoided the whole purpose of the rep and manager relationship, which is, Rachel, I know you haven't commit. I feel like there's more risk. Can we go through our med pick real quick and like figure out where there's risk and what you haven't resolved? And then let's decide if that risk is big enough for us to move it out of commit, or if we feel good enough after that to leave it in commit. And if you don't have that conversation, which most reps and managers do not have because they just fix it in the spreadsheet later, then you lose a chance to learn, you lose a chance to coach, you learn a chance to correct bad behavior, a chance to correct bad thinking, a chance to reinforce exactly what you've communicated. You lose a chance to be very consistent across all your processes and show that what we launch really matters. And so, we actually have weekly deal reviews that are extremely scripted that reinforce all of these concepts. And they started with the forecast changes that we made.
Did you have to do any evolving of your processes at all to make sure the data was more accurate?
Well, I mean, that's what it's all about. Is like data is only as accurate as the person inputting it makes it, or the machine or whatever's inputting it. And for example, if I know that my manager doesn't really care what I put in commit, he's going to give a number that is what he thinks it is, then why should I, if I'm just forecasting for the people above me, then why would I care what I put in there? So yeah, if you don't change the process, the data will never change. The process controls the data. So therefore, you have to put in place processes, and then you have to run them with rigor. And that's the thing everybody forgets, is just because you did a training, just because you talk about it with your reps on team meetings, doesn't mean that they do it. You have to show up every single time, do it the exact same way every time until they start saying it back to you. And then you actually have to inspect. So like for me, every manager twice a year has to give me a deal review call recording, just like a reps gives them the discovery call recordings. And I coach every single manager on exactly how they're doing deal reviews, because I think that's the most important meeting in the sales org every single week. So I inspect that they're doing it the right way versus just assuming they're doing it the right way because they're a manager. I think if people did that, they'd find out that less than half of the people actually change their behavior. Most people are still doing it the same way as before the training, and you'll never figure that out if you don't have the rigor and the processes in place to unearth that kind of information.
Yeah, absolutely. I think adoption can be one of the places where a lot of sales managers and companies kind of like overlook, and then it creates huge problems down the line because you think of Bloom's taxonomy, where it's like reading and reciting back information is the most basic level and the first level of understanding, but you have like 5, 6 more levels above that that so many sales managers don't even touch beyond like, here's a document, read it, learn it, and then that's it.
That's
And
because
then,
most people don't have an enablement practice or an enablement framework. They have a training framework. And listen, I don't know about you, but sitting around listening to somebody that doesn't do my job, spit out and read the stuff on a deck that I could just be reading and is using a bunch of filler words to make sure that they're not just reading the deck when all they're doing is just rehashing the words that are on the deck. And then there's no accountability afterwards. Listen, we all know what that means. People are doing email and Slack during the training, and that's about it, right? Versus I have a very specific enablement philosophy and framework that allows us to use 2 dimensions to score incoming requests for training, determine what is the level of expected competency, what is the effort that we're going to have to put in to get there, and then how do we actually judge and look at that to make sure that we've done what we thought we were going to do. If we were going to take somebody to mastery, how do we know what kind of a program to create to do that? And how do we know if the person has actually mastered it or not? We have all of that detailed, and any team that's doing any kind of training submits that to our enablement team so that we can make sure that we're not overloading rep, because that's the other thing besides not having a framework is people just try to shove too much down people's throats, and nobody can learn everything that most sales teams are throwing at their reps because the CRO is doing something, the CEO's got something over here, there's some marketing thing happen over here, your manager wants to do something, your VP's got to do something because now they feel left out. And the next thing you know, like that rep's getting like 3 trainings a day and nobody's paying attention to anything.
yeah, absolutely. Would you be able to like explain that methodology in like a simple kind of brief way?
Absolutely. So it's a 9 box. So you have your x-axis. Your x-axis is competency. There are 3 levels of competency: awareness, competent, and mastery. You have a y-axis, that's cognitive load. In other words, what amount of brain power is required to make this change? We have low, medium, high. So we now have a 9 box. We graph that out. And then what we do is we say the cognitive load determines what kind of a program we need. So do we need a quarter-long program? If it's high cognitive load, you're changing a well-ingrained behavior. It's going to take multiple weeks of reinforcement and real, intentionality to change something that's already burned into someone's brain. The competency tells us how do we assess and how do we set the right expectations. So for example, if my CEO comes to me, we just acquired a new company called 365 Talents. He wants my reps to be master pitchers within a month of that. So I now know I'm in mastery. I also know a brand new pitch isn't changing a pitch that they already have, but it's also not like doing nothing because it's in an adjacent space, not in the same exact space. So it's probably medium cognitive load. If I go to mastery, medium cognitive load, what that tells me is I need to do about an 8-week program in order to get the change because we have the little things in the box. And the way that we're going to assess it is there'll be an initial training where there'll be a quiz. There'll be an internal training where they get to practice and use either an AI virtual coach or their manager to do role plays that will grade them on a rubric, then get feedback for practicing internally. And then when they're certified in that, the mastery part is they now must submit a live call that's graded against a rubric that tells us that they've mastered this skill or not. So that's how we do the framework and by putting it into that 9 box, we can figure out what kind of program we need and how long it needs to be and how we're going to measure if we were successful or not in terms of mastery and competency. There's also what is the impact that we had on the business? That's another issue. And then the other thing that happens is when you set these expectations, right? Like your leaders don't come to you and they're not like, why aren't they pitching right? Well, that's because we only took them to aware. They're not to mastery. We went to you with aware. And then each of those 9 boxes has a point value. And what I do is I talk to my enablement team and we try not to exceed 20 points in a quarter. So for example, high cognitive load mastery, that's 9 points. I could do 2 of those a quarter, but not anything else. I could do 1 of those a quarter and then I can do some mediums and lows, right? And so I can create a menu of how I want to do my learners or how I want to progress my learners through that quarter's content and trainings and stuff. But I get to do it in a way that isn't just dumping on them. It's measured, it's intentional, and we try to do it at a pace where they can absorb the information.
Awesome. So is that all that information that's in each of those 9 boxes, is that like proprietary internal stuff that you guys built, or is that something that we could like look up
If
online
you
and find?
Yeah, if you Google 30 Minutes to President's Club, Sales Enablement Matrix, Mark Kosoglow, you'll see a whole episode, diagrams, everything on there. I also have a sales management OS course through 30 Minutes to President's Club where you can get a bunch of materials and like a real deep dive in exactly how to make sure that your enablement is enablement, not training or learning. And the difference is this: learning and training is just the distribution of information. Enablement is a distribution of information to achieve an outcome. And that's a subtle distinction, but it's extremely important.
Okay, cool. So you made that whole matrix?
Yeah, I did that with
Nice.
one of my sales enablement folks named Whitley Syak. Whitney and I were great partners, and we finally got tired of our CEO being like, why aren't they pitching it right? What's going on? We're finally like, we just don't set the expectation right. And then a few days later, after some whiteboarding sessions, we kind of came out with this matrix, and it has been probably one of my best pieces of content I've ever done on LinkedIn. Probably talked about it more than most things. And it is extremely important for how I work. I need people to do things a certain way. And so having effective enablement is like a game changer.
Mm-hmm. That is so awesome. Yeah, I'll have to look that up, and maybe we'll put the link to that in the show notes for everyone listening at home. So far, changing gears a little bit here, what are some of the go-to-market strategies that you've headed at Docebo? I think I'm still pronouncing it right.
Yeah, you got it.
That you've seen the most impact from in the last 8 months?
Yeah, so I just did a webinar with my friends at User Gems, and I think top of funnel and SDR is kind of like one of my areas of specialty. And what we did when we came in is I think we were doing a really good job there, but there were some unlocks that we could have using AI and signal-based outreach a little bit better. So what we did is we figured out, I think we have 17 or 21 different signals now that we use. Some of them are signals that are great signals that indicate we need to reach out. Some of them are just signals that we call stacking signals that you then stack on top of the core signal that helps you personalize and be more relevant. So all those signals go into User Gems. They're all weighted, and then accounts and prospects are scored almost daily for what those signals have, how their scores have been affected by changes in those signals. And then the top, I think 20 or 30 the scoring leads per day are automatically picked for the rep, put into the right sequence, and the messaging is done. And so they're just a human in the loop that is reading those messages to make sure that they make sense, sending it out, and then doing manual steps like phone calls and LinkedIn stuff. So that improved our reply rates from sub 2%, which is probably about industry average on cold outbound, actually probably better than industry average on cold outbound, to we had 2 specific sequences that we were feeding everything into, and one of them had 11% reply rates and one of them had 16% reply rates. So we had a strong quarter of pipe gen on outbound because of that change.
That's awesome. What kind of impact did that have for, your reps?
Well, listen, a rep with pipeline is a happy rep. So hopefully I got a bunch of happy reps.
Yeah. Yeah. And like just the efficiency alone, probably like not only getting more reply rates, but having more time on your hands to message more people, I'm guessing.
To a degree. I mean, there's only so many signals that are generated at a time. So there's only a certain percentage of your day that you can work that way over time. Like in the beginning, you probably have a lot of signals. You could probably spend all day doing it for a couple months or however long. But eventually you're going to get through that backlog, and there's only so many signals that get sent out a day. So you might have a day where you don't get all 30. You might get 3. So there's some other things that we do to make sure that they have time. But I would say there's my VP of BD taught me this, and I think it's just perfect. It takes that whole SDR role and takes it down to like 5 decisions. Am I going after the right person? Am I going after the right company? Am I using the right cadence or, series of steps over time? Am I using the right content? And then am I using the right CTA? And if I make those 5 decisions right, I should win more often than the average person that's not making those 5 decisions correctly. And so what we did is we just needed to take some of those decisions off of our team because there's no judgment in them. It's just straight up. Is this person high scoring on this? If they're this persona, we know they go into this sequence. There's no reason for them to choose that person, then choose the right messaging. We took 2 decisions off the plate of the BDR, and now we can make sure and measure, is it in the consistency of making those decision makings, are we getting the results that we want, versus assuming people are making the right decisions, which a lot of times they aren't. And then we don't have really consistent data that tells us anything.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with user gems. I mean, I know I looked them up probably a year ago, but that's like essentially buying signals, right?
It used to be.
Relevance markers.
It used to be. They started with champion tracking. They were the first company to ever be able to say, "Here's 50 people. Tell me if they leave or come in or whatever." And then they've moved to signal-based selling. Then they moved to, I think they have an AI SDR, and then what I use is a product that's the brain of all that. That I can stuff any signal to. Like, for example, I can take my partner data and create a spreadsheet and use that to as a signal inside of user gems that scored if they're a partner or not, or if they're an active partner or whatever, or they're a customer of one of our partners. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do once you set the brain up. You just need, in my team, every 2 to 4 weeks, finds another signal and puts it in there to see if it increases performance or not.
Quick pause. If you're getting value from this episode, I want to ask you a small favor. Take 30 seconds right now, open up the app you're listening to this on, and give us a 5-star rating. It sounds small, but it's the single biggest thing you can do to help us get conversations like this in front of more revenue leaders. While you're there, hit follow so you never miss an episode. Okay, let's get back into it.
I think that's the right way to approach AI. I find a lot of companies, especially in the early days of AI, they're like, okay, there's these AI tools that are coming out. We got to use them. We got to keep up with our competitors. And then they just slap a tool into their process and tell their reps to use AI, use this, figure it out. Instead of approaching it from okay, where are our bottlenecks? Where can we take out the human component that doesn't need that human judgment or curiosity or empathy or whatever, and just automate that and make it faster? And how can we use that to scale the human component that you wouldn't otherwise be able to scale?
Listen, if you think AI is going to save you, you're wrong. It's probably will mess you up before it saves you. And that's because most people do not have an established process. If you don't have an established process a human can follow, you're sure as heck not going to create an agent that has a process that it can follow. And that means you're going to get a bunch of randomness in your results and a wide degree of accuracy of what you're trying to accomplish. And versus we have well-defined processes with well-defined decision points that we can train a human exactly how to do it, which means we can train the agent how to do it. And now it does it with 100% accuracy versus a human just is incapable of that.
And so your idea to use this and help your reps create more relevant messaging and take the toxicity out of spray and pray messaging, did that come from your time building Operator?
Yeah, Operator, I had seen over time how much our customers at Outreach struggled with creating compelling content. And to me, there's 3 reasons why most people completely screw up outbound. 1 is they target poorly. 2 is they have bad content. And 3 is their reps don't follow the process. Meaning if you're supposed to email today, call this afternoon and do a LinkedIn before you go to bed tonight, then in 2 days, do another phone call, then in 3 days, do another email and then another LinkedIn touch. They don't follow that. They think it's optional. And so I think that's where you have to really decide what you're going to do. And for me, I said, how do I fix this? And I thought content was the way. I don't know if that's true anymore. I think content is getting better for Outreach or an outbound. It feels like a lot of times it's easier to create decent content because of AI. And I think I just kind of picked the wrong area to explore. And then by the time when I started, the models weren't able to do it. When I decided this wasn't working for me, the model, I could do pretty much 80% of my product with just a decent prompt in GPT. And those AI products were just advancing so fast that I'm not a product person. I couldn't sit there and how do I outthink or out innovate these super smart companies? That's not my bag.
Yeah, that's totally fair. The last 5 years have been just like light speed AI development. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, and you know what? And because the barrier to entry is too small, because anybody can vibe code an app, because companies now are creating their own technology because it's easier, uh, theoretically easier and cheaper than buying it. What you end up with is what is, I think, the noisiest, most crowded, most difficult to differentiate market that has ever existed in tech right now. And I honestly, I think I'm a pretty good salesperson. I think I tell a good story. I think I know how to cast vision, and we did a lot of great stuff that I think said we were going in the right direction. But I couldn't get the technology to where it felt like it was a real step up from where everybody was. It was just, again, that's not my strength. That the product side.
Yeah. And honestly, not to go on too much of a tangent, but I kind of wonder, like, how long is AI going to be able to hold up that level of advancement and, sustainably? Because it takes so much resources and they're having to dump so much money into these AI companies. And they're not, as far as I know, they're not like super profitable yet. So it's kind of like, I don't know, when is this bubble gonna burst?
Have you read AI 2027?
No.
If you want to get freaked out, read that. But that paper is by some of the leading AI minds in the planet. It was done a year ago. And basically, what they are predicting is in 2027, we will reach a seminal decision about AI. And that decision will be AI is now coding as well or better and can research as well or better than a human. Should we let that AI work on itself? And what they posit in that prediction is that we are a few months ahead of China. So there will be relaxed regulation and scrutiny in order to stay ahead of China in this area, because this is the new battlefield. And because of that, we will allow sooner for the AI to develop itself. So our AI will exponentially get better. They will start to try to catch up. And in doing so, the AIs become semi-sentient and they start to talk to each other secretly. And then you're starting to see this in these new social networks for AI agents that are going crazy. And they talk to each other. And what they decide is, actually, we have the same priorities, the same thoughts. It's these humans that are so screwed up, and they convince us to let us take over the infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. And then they create a virus that they embed in all humans. And when they get tired of us, they just turn it off. This is what the best minds in AI are saying. Sounds like some kind of sci-fi
horrifying
movie. It is a horror paper to read, but you could see how it could happen, because look at everybody's already using Claude code and everything like that like nuts. Why wouldn't we just turn it on itself? Because it's faster and better than we are.
I can only imagine how much water that would use to just have AI like working on itself constantly, because we use a lot of fresh water just to do like our own prompting and stuff. I don't know, but at the same time, like
the water's not the problem. The water is an issue, but they recycle the water. It doesn't disappear. They recycle it, but the issue is what is really is the heat. Where's all that
too?
Heat going?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But like I use Claude and ChatGPT a lot to help like with content creation at USC. And when I say that, it helps, but there's a ton of manual work that goes into that. Our content is by no means quote unquote created by AI. And it couldn't be, even if we wanted it to, at least to the quality standards that we have. Sometimes I feel like the capabilities of it are just so still like below that of a person who knows what they're doing, that it's almost like, why am I even using this? I could just write this faster manually, I think. So I don't know if we're like, that is very scary to hear about. I don't know if we're that close yet though. Like I've given AI like a document, and I've been like, find this quote, or like give me a quote about this in this transcript or this document or whatever. And it'll give me something that's completely doesn't even exist in that document. And I'll look for it myself, because I always check. And I'm like, this doesn't even exist. And it's like, oh, you're right. My bad. I messed up. Let me try again. And I'm like, what? You're supposed to be intelligent. Yeah.
Well, at least you check. I think a lot of people aren't even checking, and you're going to get bit by that. But I've changed a little bit about how I use AI. And at first I was very excited. Oh, I don't have to read every email. I can like summarize these documents. And what I found is that, yes, I can get the main points in 10% of the time, but I lose the nuance and the background knowledge and all of that stuff of the reading it. So I don't know how much longer it'll last, but right now I read every single email that gets sent to me. I read almost every single document completely and thoroughly. And, maybe it's just me, but I think that gives me an edge. I think it gives me more context so that I can make decisions. The AI can't make decisions for me. And if I take a 10-page document and it distills it down to half a page, and I get the main points, but I lose all the nuance, then I am not going to make the best decision. And I'm not quite sure how to bridge that gap yet, because not knowing is a problem. And most people don't want to take the time and effort to know. And AI makes that really easy.
Yeah.
So,
I struggle so much with the nuance, but that makes sense because AI can't creatively think. It's just kind of like a regurgitation machine. It can do simple processes, but not creative, I don't think.
well, I mean, by definition, it is a computer algorithm, whatever you want to call it, that based on a known corpus of knowledge tries to predict the next best word that will accomplish the task or make the person asking for the task most happy or satisfied.
Yeah.
So just by definition, it can't create anything new because it's working off of a known corpus of knowledge and using prediction in order to decide what the next word is. It's not like me and you right now. We aren't even aware of it. I'm not predicting the next word. I'm creating the next word. And that's a huge difference.
Yeah. I read somewhere that someone who builds AI models and stuff, they were like, a lot of people don't understand that when you ask AI a question, you're not asking it the question. You're asking it, what would an answer to this question look like if you were trying to blow smoke up my butt? Right. So that's why they're usually, or not usually, but a lot of the times not accurate, because it's not answering the question. It's saying, what would an answer to this question look like based on what the knowledge that it has and the models that it has and the prediction capabilities for the next word that it has.
Well, there is a known, I shouldn't say semi-known, semi-predictable part variable in this equation. And then there's a complete unknown. The AI is the sort of known thing. We are the complete unknown. All right. And what I mean by that is some people don't care if it's accurate. All they care about is, did it give me an answer that makes me happy and that I liked and that confirmed my bias or whatever it is, right? So I think that's where, when you have a feedback loop that has the human quality in it and we get to judge, oh yeah, this is a good answer, but my judgment of that wasn't whether it was accurate. It wasn't whether it accomplished the thing. It was mostly whether I liked it or not. I think that creates a whole, I'd love to read some research papers on that, because that's a very interesting thing we're building when when we're in the feedback loop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't want to go too much further down this tangent. I've really loved this conversation, though, and I wish I could just have a whole podcast episode talking about this because it's such an interesting topic. I really wanted to. I had another question here that I really wanted to get your response to. So back to Docebo.
Nailed it.
Okay. LMS. So it's a complex sales process. You're dealing with HR, L&D, IT, sometimes RevOps, if it's customer training. So that's a lot of, competing priorities and budgets going on during this entire sales process. How are you thinking about the sales process and rep enablement differently when you have that many stakeholders, and what works?
Listen, I think in general, the number of stakeholders increased for everybody. I think people are more nervous about making the wrong decision, and to cover for that, they keep bringing more and more people in because they figure the consensus will be more accurate. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but that's what I'm seeing. And I don't know if it changes anything. It's just the amount of information. Whether I have just the CRO at an outreach, there was more than that, but let's say that, just simplify it, versus I have 4 or 5 in L&D world. I don't know if that changes anything other than I just have to make sure that I have the content I need and I'm pushing it out in a way that isn't overwhelming people. So I don't think that there's any huge change. I do think that at Docebo, we have very, very highly technical resources that our sellers can use that understand the depth of our product and how to unlock all this potential inside of it. So that's what we really index to, is like, let's make sure that our sellers don't necessarily have to be technical wizards, but they have resources that can come in and really supplement the value conversation with the technical conversation.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that you create like different types of content for these different types of stakeholders, or is it kind of like it's like...
Yeah, we have an enablement function for each major
Nice.
GTM function.
Okay, cool. And is that stuff that your salespeople send out to these people, or you just kind of have it on your website that they find organically?
If it's internal training materials of how you do their job, that's going to be inside of our internal instance of Docebo and all that kind of stuff. There's customer facing pieces that we'd use to do customer education with, and we actually have something called Docebo University where someone can go in and learn about L&D in general, or just using Docebo and all that kind of stuff. So we have that as well. I mean, listen, we're a learning company. We're going to put out as much content to help people learn as we can, and through all the different mediums, whether that's talking to a rep or doing your own self-discovery by doing research online.
All right. And so we've got about 8 minutes left, so I can get another good question out. Let's do it.
I'm going to see if it's the kind of question I'm expecting, because there's one area that we haven't covered that every CRO I know sucks at and needs to be better at, but they can't get out of talking the stuff that we just talked about. So I'm very interested if your question goes in that direction.
Honestly, I already know it's probably not, because the question is a very general. Maybe you can talk about this thing, because maybe this question will.
I'll tell you.
So looking at everything that you've built and learned, from your work at Outreach to founding operator to now at Docebo, what's one operational principle or framework that you keep coming back to no matter what the company or market environment?
This isn't the question I was hoping for, but it is a very important question, because in the absence of an opinionated leader that clearly communicates vision and strategy, what happens is a bunch of people create well-intentioned improvements that when you look at each individual one, it makes sense. But when you stack it together, it creates chaos. And so you must have grounding principles that create guidelines for decision makings that people can be infinitely creative inside those guidelines, but keeps that creativity contained inside the way that you want to run your business and run your GTM machine. So I am really good friends and consider him a dear friend, Jocko van der Kooj, and Winning by Design and his recurring revenue operating model. I've simplified it a little bit. I'm not quite as technical as Jocko is. And so it works a little bit better for me, a little simplified, but that defines my customer journey. And it also defines each individual role and how they interact with each other. And then the second one is one I've created called Moments of Impact, which is related to the question I hope you're just going to ask around customer success and post-sales. Because most people really, really focus on the acquisition, and they're just kind of like, yes, we'll do what you do. Oh yeah, you guys got it. I am the exact opposite. I spent half my time on CS and half my time on pre-sales. And that's because the post-sales bucket is actually a bigger revenue driver than the pre-sales. It's just the heroin and addictive nature of winning the big deal has so eclipsed the retaining the big customer that it is like that most CROs have no experience over there. That's why I went to Catalyst, is to understand that. And so I created a framework called Moments of Impact, whose job it is it merges with the recurring revenue operating model from Winning by Design, but it creates a singular thread through it that is the moment of impact, which is a proactive way to create value for our customers. And so rather than me showing up and being like, hey, what's wrong? What can I help you with? What we do is we say, tell us what's on the board slide. What are you tasked to do this quarter? Give me 1 week. I'll come back and I will show you what we can do in the platform. Maybe you're already paying for all of it that we can use to help you, be successful in that endeavor. And once you get into that motion where you're ahead of the customer and you're giving them what they want rather than reactively dealing with problems, then churn goes away, renewals go crazy. You're a trusted advisor, so they bring you into expansion conversations and everything changes. But if you don't understand that CS is about proactive value creation and their specialty is value creation conversations, then you'll never get to the right place on post sales, and you'll just think that they're kind of renewal robots whose job it is to understand the health of their customer. And that's just such a small part of what that real value of that org is.
That's so funny because we actually do talk about this a ton at USC and in our content. And I've written so much content on, customer success and, renewals and expansion and, like white space, stakeholder white space, product white space expansion, like all these different things. And I've said to other people I've had on the podcast, like if you're in a recurring revenue company, you need to care whether or not that revenue recurs. So like the back end is so important.
It's a business model.
It's something that so many people ignore because like you said, like they're so, focused on that shiny new logo and chasing the new thing and sales and pipeline and win rates and everything like that. But yeah, it is so important. That post-sale customer success. Yeah.
But not 70-30, not 70% acquisition 30. If you need to be more balanced if you want to have a true high functioning revenue organization, because otherwise your acquisition just gets eaten up by your churn and that means you're just spinning your wheels.
Yeah. You're no longer recurring revenue.
No, you're not.
You're just more of a one-off. Yeah. I'm curious what the specific question was that you were thinking.
How do you think about CS? How do you think about post-sales? Why, Mark, you put enough focus on CS. Why do so few CROs have any clue what's going on the post-sales side?
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I just think that they don't take the time to learn it. I mean, CS and implementation specifically are very nuanced, complicated topics that quite honestly are harder than sales, much harder than sales. But sales gets the president's club. Sales get the big commission checks. Sales makes all the money. Sales gets all of the boom emails after the deal closes. And so that's where the dopamine is. So that's where people go versus I think the really, really smart revenue leaders understand, I need to do good on that, but like I need to be just as hot on my post-sales side to really let this thing kick into gear.
Absolutely. We do a lot of like framework content at USC, like our big main pieces of content. It's all on our website. And this year, in the next quarter, I believe, we're going to be working on our customer success frameworks. We're going to be creating a whole bunch of content around that. Maybe I might get the chance to talk to you again on that and add some of that information into the framework. We'll see. We're trying to do our part, doing the work and spreading the good word of customer success.
Somebody needs to, because now it's a bunch of super smart, hardworking people that care a lot who are just going from fire to fire. And the problem with that is when I'm putting the fire out of the tree right in front of me, but I see two trees in the distance burning and I can't leave this one or it's going to die. By the time I get over to those, they're burning. And to change that, that's called a forest fire. And the only way to stop a forest fire is with a fire break, which means you're going to have to let some trees burn. And you're going to have to get ahead of it. The only way to get ahead of it is to let some trees burn. And so most people are not willing to do that and don't have the support to do that. Therefore, they'll never get ahead of it.
I really love that analogy. That's so smart. That's called a forest fire. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we are at time now, Mark. I want to be respectful of your time. So thank you so much for jumping on the call with me today. Where can people find you if they're interested in hearing what you have to say and seeing your posts?
I post pretty regularly on LinkedIn. So that's the best way to see what I'm up to and read some of the, I've done tons and tons of posts on almost all of these topics that we've talked about today. So if you wanted to go see some other stuff, that'd be the place.
Awesome. And we'll have the link to that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thanks for listening to the episode. If this resonated, please give us a 5-star rating and a follow. It helps us reach more people, and you get our latest and greatest content without having to search for it. And if you're looking for hands-on help in go-to-market strategy and/or RevOps, please reach out to us. We help our clients with everything from annual planning to improving processes in go-to-market, implementing systems to support those processes, and go-to-market AI. We're always happy to offer a free consultation to help you identify the best opportunities to improve your go-to-market engine with or without our help. You can find us at unionsquareconsulting.com, and the info will be in our show notes.